Welcome to Discovering You, a podcast that explores the intricacies of personality and how it impacts the way we navigate through life. What will you discover today? Hi, listeners. Hi, Heather.
Hi there.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you.
How was your holiday?
It was good. It was quiet, but good. How about yourself?
I would say the opposite. Well, no, it was good. So that's the same. It was not quiet. It was very busy, but fun. Lots of family gatherings and lots of social plans, which was nice. Nice to see people. Probably need a little bit of downtime to recover, even though this is supposed to be the downtime, but no complaints.
Oh, good.
On that note, how do you feel today? Did you do your mood meter?
I did. I am in the yellow zone with a high energy and pleasant, and my word is encouraged.
Oh, okay.
Feeling supported and hopeful with a sense of increasing confidence.
Wow. I'm so fascinated by these definitions. That's really illuminating. It totally makes sense.
What did you get?
I am also in the yellow zone today, and I got enthusiastic, which means highly interested in an idea or activity, which would be this. First project of the new year. And this is one of my favorite parts of what I get to do is doing this podcast. So I think that's probably why I got it. So that's awesome.
That's amazing.
So we're kicking the year off with a fun, but also really helpful topic, charisma, or as Gen Z calls it, Riz. Did you know that?
I did because you said it.
Did you know it before I said it?
No, I didn't.
Okay. Yeah, they love that. It's Riz. So there you go. Before we jump into that, though, here is this episode's disc illustration. It's timely as the Golden Globes were on Sunday. Here are some nominated actors whose characters exemplify each disc factor. I tried to select shows that were very popular, and hopefully you'll be familiar. Heather, I'm not going to ask you because I feel like every time I do, you say no.
I don't watch the Golden Globes, but I am familiar with most of these characters.
Okay, great. There we go. For High D, I chose Jodie Foster in True Detective, Night Country. She plays Liz Danvers, a police chief in a small town in Alaska. Her character is very strong, results-driven. She does not mince words. Did you watch this one, Heather?
I watched the first few episodes.
Okay. I really liked it, even though I wasn't sure because Alaska and it's like the winter and it's dark. It's during this period of time. And I was like, oh, I don't know. It might be depressing, but I found it cozy in a weird way. I don't know how to explain it, but it was really great. Probably my favorite, actually, of those.
Really?
Yeah.
I've never watched any of them. That's the only one I've started to.
Well, there's also a bit of a supernatural kind of element to it, which I think maybe tweaked my interest. That's just a little hint. If you haven't watched it, check it out.
Well, maybe we need to add like a section to the podcast about TV shows that you like, because most of the shows I watch is because you've said they're good.
That's so funny. And I feel like I'm limited. There's a lot of ones I can't watch. Like we will have communal ones like that I can watch with Chris, and then he has his shows. We've talked about this before, but I can't handle anything that's too violent or gory or scary. There was moments for sure in True Detective that I was like, I don't know if I can watch this. Then I would just close my eyes and Chris would fill me in. Moving on to High I, it's Kristen Bell in Nobody Wants This. Her character, Joanne, is a sex podcaster. So that checks the box of high I's and their propensity to share openly, sometimes too much. She also embodies the charming, flirty nature of the influence factor. And for High S, I chose another character from Nobody Wants This. Also, because this is one of the biggest shows of the year. Everybody's buzzing about this.
I binge watch it straight through. Did
you?
Stop for anything. Yeah, straight through.
Oh my God, that's amazing. For this one, I chose Adam Brody, and his character is Noah, aka Hot Rabbi. That seems to be what, if you look at that on social media, that'll pop up. Being the rabbi definitely demonstrates the highest traits of being a good listener, wanting to help others, and a totally steady Eddie vibe. And then finally, High C, So my example comes from Only Murders in the Building. It's Steve Martin, whose character is Charles. He's a former actor and a true crime enthusiast who stumbles into solving murders with his fellow podcast hosts. His attention to detail, fussiness, and striving for perfection is very high C. Back to today's topic. I think we need to frame this up, Heather. I think we should share the coincidence, depending on how you frame it. It could be a coincidence. It could be a meant to be-ness, making up my own words here, of today's subject. I was away for work and you had shared a link to a podcast and just basically said, this is really great. You should check it out. I think you'll like it. And then you and I had our Christmas lunch that we met for, and I hadn't had a chance to listen to it yet, but we were just randomly talking, right? And you said, tell me, what are you thinking for the next episode? So then I started to tell you about what we're going to be talking about, Charisma and Vanessa Van Edwards. You kind of thought, oh, that sounds familiar.
Yeah. Well, and it was so interesting because it's not a show I don't think that you listened to, the one that I sent you.
Yeah.
But in the actual episode, she says, if you think of someone, you should text them.
Right.
Instantly, when I was listening to it, I thought of you. So I was like, I'm going to take her advice and I'm going to send it to you, knowing it wasn't a show you listened to, but thinking it would be interesting. I'm not great with names. And so when you said it, it sounds exactly like what she was saying.
Yes.
I didn't recognize it. So I get on Spotify and I'm looking it up and I'm like, it is the same person.
Right. And so we're sitting there. It's so weird because first of all, you sent it to me because of the whole, you're thinking of someone, you think of me, you send it to me. Then I'm saying to you, I'm not sure if I'm going to do this first. Here's this woman, Vanessa Van Edwards, blah, blah, blah. And then anyway, again, very funny how that all came to be. We clearly are on the same wavelength where this is
meant
concerned.
to be.
Right?
Yep.
Last summer, I was lucky enough to have the opportunity to see Vanessa Van Edwards in person speak at a mastermind conference that I attended in San Diego. She was fantastic and, yes, charismatic. Her line of work is so in my wheelhouse. So, Heather, you were absolutely right when you were listening. Little did you know that I'd already seen her at that point. Vanessa is a human behavior investigator, and she founded the company The Science of People, which provides science-backed studies, articles, and tips on social skills and communication to help people find success not only in business, but in life. Vanessa's goal when launching her business, and what still drives her today, is a particular desire to help introverts and, quote, recovering awkward people, those are her words, like herself. That's self-described. She's candid about how she used to feel awkward navigating social situations, trying to make friends, even working with her fellow students on a group project. She shares an anecdote about asking her professor to let her do a project alone and double the workload to avoid participating with the group members. He was the one who actually provided some valuable insight. He told her, why don't you apply the same focus and research skills that you're showing in science to study people? She was studying chemistry. So basically take that same drive, work ethic, focus, and study people. That was an aha moment for her. And so this began her path to study the science of people. On the subject of charisma, Vanessa had assumed it was something that people were born with. You either had it or you didn't. But upon deep investigation of it, it turns out that it can be learned. So I'm also kind of surprised by that. What about you, Heather? That you can just learn charisma?
I'm not super surprised, but I feel like it's sometimes more innate than others.
Yeah, I would agree. She cites a groundbreaking Princeton study where researchers pinpointed what makes people likable, compelling, and yes, charismatic. It came down to a combination of two traits. Listeners, I'll give you a minute. Any guesses on this? It's warmth and competence. These two traits account for over 80% of our impressions of others. Now, the problem, according to Vanessa, is that most of us have an imbalance between warmth and competence, and she believes that this is often the hidden cause of social difficulties and miscommunications. And she points out that it's not having one or the other, but a balance of both. For instance, people who communicate using too many warm cues are often regarded as trustworthy, but not necessarily responsible. The desire to be liked can get in the way of setting boundaries and perceived confidence. Communicators that use too many competent cues are seen as smart, but not always approachable. The drive to be productive and accomplished can block the ability to connect. Vanessa created the charisma scale, which is a model to gauge a person's warmth and competence. There are 4 quadrants. Does this remind you of anything? Hello, disc. Picture this. The top right quadrant is charisma. The top left is warmth. The bottom right is competent. And the bottom left is danger zone. Listeners, if you'd like to take the quiz and find out where you land on the charisma scale, there will be a link in the show notes. But here are some 4 sample questions to give you a sense of what it's like. As with other quizzes and assessments we've featured on the show, it uses a Likert type scale, and in this case, it's from 1 to 5. 1 represents not at all, and 5 means extremely. Question number 1, how friendly do you consider yourself to be? Remember, 1 is not at all friendly, and 5 is extremely friendly. Heather, you and I did the quiz, and we'll share our results later. But do you remember what you answered for this one?
So I gave myself a 3.
Okay.
Actually, I looked up the definition of friendly after. I get a little in the weeds with some of these quizzes.
That's very high C of you.
In the dictionary, it said kind and pleasant. I think that I am that, but it's not something I would use to describe myself. So anyways, I went with a 3.
Okay. Funny. I gave myself a 3 also. The next part of this question is more interesting to me anyway. The next part of that question is, how friendly would others consider you to be? I like this part of the question because it's really tying in EQ and self-awareness. Now, in this instance, I did end up giving myself the same number on this, but not so much on the other ones. How about you, Heather?
I also gave myself a 3 here, but then I asked Frank because he happened to be in the room when I was doing the quiz, and he said 4. But then I think that's because I'm friendlier than he is. But I think in general population, we're probably not as friendly as some.
That is so funny. Let's move on to the next one. Number 2 is, how warm do you consider yourself to be? I answered 4 for this part, but for the second part, how warm do others consider you to be? I answered 3. I find the second part is so tricky to answer. Heather, I don't know if you've had this experience too. I think that people who know me really well would say I'm much higher on the warmth because they know me, right? So they know I'm thinking of them, I'm worrying about them, I'm wanting to take care of them. But I think I present, and I'm doing air quotes here, to the Gen Pop, as we say, as more controlled and aloof, because unfortunately I have heard that feedback in my life, more so when I was younger. But I think that ties into the whole introversion topic. Often we're seen as unfriendly or unapproachable. And again, here's all our past podcast episodes merging here. But do you find it also tricky, Heather, on this part? It's like, what do others think?
Same when I was younger, it would have been a lot easier. People would have thought I'm a snob, I'm aloof, whatever that was.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I work on actually trying to appear warmer than I am. I literally had an experience this morning where I'm like, okay, I have to go in. There's going to be a lot of people. I'm feeling not great about it, but I'm going to get excited about it so that I can have that warm interaction where normally left to my own defenses, I was like walked in, grabbed what I needed and left.
Right.
And I wouldn't have any interaction. So I think that I'm more aware of that. Maybe now as I'm getting older or maturing or whatever it is, I feel like people actually think I'm warmer than I am because I've learned in the past that I don't come across that way.
Yeah, same. And again, like listeners, if you want to do a deep dive into all of this kind of stuff with Vanessa Van Edwards, there's so much about what you're signaling inadvertently that you may not realize. These are life skills, right? I think when I was younger, I'd be like, I'm not changing my personality. That's, that, and it's not changing personality, right? It's not changing your personality. That's what I always want to say. It's literally just making sure that cues, things, again, this is so in my wheelhouse of what I talk about with DISC. Let's make sure that we are not right out of the gates misunderstanding each other.
I had a call the other day and it was a Zoom like this, and I just get into it and I don't do Zooms very often. The person was like, "What's that face all about?" And I was like, "Sorry?" And they're like, "What's going on?" And I'm like, "Nothing." Because I had no idea how I was presenting, but I must have just zoned out. And anyways, it wasn't great.
Well, so on that episode of the podcast you sent me, Vanessa talks about, so RBF, well, he called it resting bitch face. She said resting bored face, I think is how she said it. This is the part that's hard, literally depending on your face and the structure of your face. Like some of us are neutral expression, our mouths downturned. So I have that. That is one of those things where people are like, are you okay? Are you mad? Are you sad? And it's like, no, I'm just, but again, I've talked about this story a lot in sessions and talks I've done about, this is before the Zoom world, but filming a promotional video for the company where I was working, and we had a meeting. And so we saw the footage, and I remember what was happening when the footage was being taken. Someone was talking and I was concentrating on, really focused on what they were saying. And I saw my face and I was like, oh, now I get it. Now I get why people say that. And it's unfortunate because it's certainly not how I was feeling. But the point is, the responsibility is on me to make sure that that's not being misunderstood. There you go. That was a little bit of a detour.
Sorry.
But very relevant. No. I think very, very relevant. And now we got to bring up RBF, which I loved them talking about. And I actually hadn't put this in my note. Okay. The next question is, how competent do you consider yourself to be? Well, I have a tendency to overthink things. You may have noticed. For me, this would vary greatly depending on the area of confidence being measured. So if I have to like build or assemble something, I would rather not answer this question because it would not be a very high number. But like you're supposed to do when you're answering a DISC questionnaire, I'm answering with my job in mind. Because of the job that I do, I gave myself a 4. This feels weird to reveal, but for the second part, how competent do others consider me to be? I actually said 5. So I gave that higher. Again, I'm thinking about work people. I'm thinking about clients. I also think this ties into the thing of us usually, as an individual, we're often harder on ourselves. But I honestly feel like sometimes people give me too much credit for knowing things. Sometimes people think that my analytical or observational skills are next level and they think I can read their minds. So I am not at that level. I will want to put that out there. But what did you answer for this one, Heather?
I was the same, and I feel the same way. So if it's in a work perspective, then 100% I give myself a 4. But if someone asked me how competent I was at cooking, it would have been completely different. Wouldn't even made the scale.
Well, that's why you have Frank.
That's where I got in the weeds with it, because I think the things that I'm competent at, I'm very competent at, or the things that I want to be competent at. And I'm good at figuring things out. So if I want to learn how to do something, I do. But at the same time, if I'm not interested, I'm not competent. So is it like a natural competence? Is it like the willingness to become competent? And then it just went off the rails from there. So I gave myself a 4 in both.
Wow, I think we could really get into the weeds on that for sure. And I think what's happening here is both of our high C's because, well, first of all, overanalyzing, there you go. But also C's really have a lot of their confidence comes from experience and practice and knowledge and all of those things. And so competence ties right into that. I think that's probably why we're coming at it that way. All right. So the last sample question I'm going to do is, how ambitious do you consider yourself to be? This is tricky for me. I answered 3. I think the reason for this is that I don't see myself being ambitious in a typical way. The whole hustle and grind culture is so off-putting to me, and I do not connect with that at all. When I see someone else operating that way, I feel anxious, and I'm truly mystified how they're not burning out, which is not to say that maybe they are and I don't know it, but I think I prioritize balance and harmony. And I'm not saying that to sound all, woo-woo. I don't feel like it's a choice for me. It's a necessity. And this is, again, tying into me being HSP and an introvert. Before I get to the second part of that question, Heather, do you know what I'm saying, I guess? And are you surprised that I only gave myself a 3 on that one? I'm curious to know your thoughts.
I also had to look up the definition of ambitious.
Well, your high C is really showing up.
Well, no, because the ambitious, it's not that you're not ambitious. Hustle to me is different than ambition, right?
Mm-hmm.
Ambitious, it said having or showing a strong desire and determination to succeed. You can still have that desire to succeed and not be hustling, right? So anyways, I gave myself a 4. Same thing though, if it's something I want to be ambitious about and succeed in, then I'm 100% all in all the time. But if not, then I'm not.
Okay.
That makes sense?
It does. And for the second part, how ambitious do others consider you to be? Well, I answered it higher. I answered that I would think others would probably say 4. I think that when you have your own business and if you're doing any kind of like presenting or public speaking like I do, I think people regard you in this way. And again, I just think it's so fascinating to explore the divide between self-perception and those of others. I would love to chat with Vanessa about this part of it, like what others' perceptions are. How do people's answers vary based on their personalities, their levels of self-awareness, their behavioral characteristics? Of course, like with DISC. Does high D answer it a certain way? My guess is yes. What did you put for the second part of this, Heather? Did you have the number the same or did you think others would perceive you differently?
I do think others would perceive me differently because of how much I work.
Yeah.
The perception of that is that my ambition is high.
What did I call you at the beginning of this episode?
Yeah. So you think you're a workaholic?
I did say that very gently.
But then I have a lot of thoughts on it because you're not the only person that says that to me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I think people would think they would say 5. But if it was the ambition to be as fit as I could be or eat as healthy as I could be or have the cleanest house or those types of ambitions, they're less so. But in a work situation, I would think.
I think it's all contextual, which is clearly what's coming up here because I could say the same thing for different categories, right? There are more questions than this, and you can check it out on the Science of People website. Let's dive into the scale now and learn about each quadrant. The upper right quadrant is charisma, which is seen as, no surprise, the ideal zone. This quadrant is a blend of warmth and competence. Highly charismatic people send out signals of trust and credibility by balancing their warm and competent communication cues. The strengths: they are effective and approachable, they're great team leaders and communicators. Their struggles: they're often in demand, and so they may struggle to balance everything. And the goal for them is to maintain this balance between high warmth and competence in every interaction. To make it fun and relatable, Vanessa uses some characters from pop culture to put the scale into context. Does this seem familiar? Who else might do that?
I wonder why I thought you'd like that episode so much.
I wonder. These charismatic characters are likable, admired, and can get things done. The examples she's used are Olivia Pope from Scandal, Jake Peralta from Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and Han Solo from Star Wars, who is on my high I DISC slide. So there is such a strong disconnection to the high charisma zone. High I's are very charismatic. And yeah, I use Han Solo on my high I slide. So that's so funny. It also works perfectly because high I is the upper right quadrant of the DISC scale. So there you go. Moving on. The upper left quadrant is warm. Warm communicators are seen as friendly, likable, and trustworthy by others. Their strengths are that they build rapport, collaborate, and make people feel comfortable. Their struggles are they may have a hard time saying no or setting boundaries for fear of disappointing others or being disliked. This one resonates a bit. The goal for them is they need to purposefully increase their competence cues to move into the charisma zone. This helps them to be both liked and respected. For fictional characters, Vanessa uses Andy Dwyer, Parks and Rec, Kenneth from 30 Rock, and Kelly Kapoor from The Office as examples. I actually don't watch any of these shows, but I think I get the sense, especially when I liken them to the DISC factor that I think this one aligns with. Heather, do you have a guess for which one you think warm aligns with DISC-wise?
My guess is high S.
And that is exactly what I think. So that's awesome. Because, a lot of the descriptive words for S, right, are definitely amiable, warm, also wanting to help others and think of others and be in supportive professions. And that's also why I talked about the resonating, in terms of setting boundaries because you want to make other people happy and all of that kind of stuff. That checks out. All right. Now we're looking at the lower right quadrant, which is competent. So competent communicators are seen as impressive, powerful, and capable by others. Their strengths are that they are efficient, productive, and can direct and lead others. The struggles are that they may have challenges building rapport, be considered hard to talk to, or seen as cold or intimidating. Their goal is they need to increase their warmth cues to move them into the charisma zone. The characters used to illustrate this quadrant are Raymond Holt from Brooklyn Nine-Nine, Velma from Scooby-Doo, and Dwight from The Office. Why are you laughing? Scooby-Doo?
Scooby-Doo. I did watch that as a kid.
Oh my gosh, me too. And Sophia loves it too, to this day. I think this one represents a combination of high D and high C. I see it in the descriptive word. Powerful, productive, intimidating. Those line up with high D, and adjectives like efficient, cold, unfortunately, capable line up with C. This brings us to the fourth and final quadrant. The lower left is the danger zone. People who do not send enough warm or competent communication signals fall into the danger zone. This one is a little bit different because obviously there aren't any strengths here. Researchers found that when warmth and competence cues are missing, people are more likely to be overlooked, dismissed, undervalued, and even pitied. This may occur when people are masking or hiding their true feelings, and it can play out in these two ways. People may undersignal, they're seen as stoic or boring, or signal incorrectly and be regarded as annoying or mean. The characters who exemplify this quadrant are Hitchcock from Brooklyn Nine-Nine, Jerry from Parks and Rec, and Toby from The Office. It's a smart idea to pay attention to your colleagues and notice which style they use. As with disc facilitation, learning to understand a different style to yours decreases the chance of miscommunication and helps create a successful relationship. To learn more about how to increase warmth and competence leading to charisma, you can check out Vanessa's best-selling book titled Cues. Heather, I wonder if our regular listeners can guess where we ranked on the charisma scale. And honestly, I have to say I was a little bit surprised by my results. How did you feel about yours?
I was a little bit surprised about mine as well.
We can get into that as to why. I scored in the charisma zone, so yay. But, honestly, when I was reading the descriptions, I really felt like I was going to get the warm zone. And of course, this lines up because S is my highest factor. Certainly a lot of the struggles resonated with me. The boundaries, the having to maybe say no to people, worrying about what other people think. Like this is such a recurring pattern for me. But I do think it's nuanced. Just like if you do a full disc assessment and you can see where your dot is on the disc graph. In this case, they use a star where your star appears on the scale as relevant. And so I'm going to do my best, listeners, because obviously we're in an audio medium here. It's very clear when you have a visual, but if you're picturing the quadrants, the top right, my star is fully in the charisma quadrant, but it's not really high up. I would describe it as maybe sitting just above the line. And it's also closer to the left side, which is leaning towards warm. Maybe that explains it a little bit to me. Like, yes, I'm there, I'm in the zone. But it's not like I'm at the very high end of that quadrant. Like I said, I'm just sort of above the line. And again, if I lean to one side, it's leaning towards the warmth. Whereas Heather, with your scale, so you look like with your star, it's sitting mostly in the competent quadrant, but it peaks up over the line into charisma. And where mine is closer to the left, yours is closer to the right, which would kind of signal more of the competence. Even though we both got the same overall quadrant, I guess the nuances are in where it's placed. Do you think that it maybe explains it a little bit?
Where I was surprised was when you get your results, it's like, you have charisma. And I was like, well, that surprises me because I fully thought I would just sit in the competent zone, maybe even lower than in the warmth scale than I am in the actual scale. But when you look at it, like the visual, I'm like, yeah, that makes sense to me. It looks like I'm like 90% competent, 10% charismatic.
Okay.
That's how I do it.
Yeah. So this is the question I would have for Vanessa then is, does it mean that if you're in it partially, maybe it's like a little bit of charisma goes a long way? Maybe that's what it's about, right? Listeners, if you want to have an idea, you can check out her website, have a look at it. If you see the scale, it will make a lot more sense to you. And honestly, I only scratched the surface of this topic. There's so much more. So stay tuned for more in the future.
Maybe she'll come on.
Yes, maybe she will. Stay tuned. Thanks for joining us today and catch you next time.
Bye. Introduction to DISC. A succinct, lively talk which outlines the foundations of DISC theory and how to infuse it into work and daily life. Great as a standalone session or an introductory step in the team-building office culture process. If you are interested in connecting with Victoria for team building, strategic onboarding, coaching, or a speaking engagement, you can contact her at discoverwhatworks@gmail.com.
This show is a Twisted Spur media production produced by our very own Heather McPherson. If you enjoyed this podcast, please share with a friend and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.